Hi guys, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of Total War Arena. So, we have got the Wardogs, led by Boudica. So I've been getting these on the weekend. This weekend we've been having sort of a reduction on unit upgrade costs to get up to tier 4. So I thought it was a good opportunity to dive in and get Boudica up and have a bit of a go with the Wardogs. And I have to say I have been really enjoying them. They were a little bit confusing at first, and it took me a few games to sort of get used to how it works. Because obviously you're not only controlling your effectively your swordsman, your small unit of barbarian infantry, but you're also controlling these units of dogs. So you're effectively controlling 6 units. However, the dogs are sort of semi-autonomous, and they're not completely controllable. So sort of a little bit confusing, but hopefully when we'll have a look at a bit of gameplay, you'll sort of get a feeling for how that works out. Upgrade wise, there's not really that much to upgrade. I've done the basic harness, which gives them slightly more charge, impact and movement speed, because when dogs charge into an attacking enemy unit, they charge in and they cause knockdown and impact damage. So they've got that, and there's basic training, which gives them a bit more damage and impact damage as well, so something else to get. And obviously the sword only affects the infantry units, the actual barbarian soldiers themselves, although that's compatible with the tier 4 barbarians, so once I get that, that'll apply to both the units. Consumables wise, I'm currently running them with the dog whistle, which just gives a temporary increase to movement speed of your dogs. But having played a few games now, I'll probably be inclined to change this. With it sort of the way it plays out, I think the dogs are pretty quick anyway. I'm more inclined probably to use incentives, which give increased melee damage and melee attack. So I think that's probably useful. The spar obviously only affects the warriors themselves, so not really all that useful, I don't think. So I probably won't bother with that. And that's really all there is to say about it. Boudica, obviously we're running at tier 4, so we've not got Rebellion yet currently activated. Although once we get that to tier 5, we'll have another video looking at that as well. Ambush doesn't seem a particularly useful ability for Boudica, to be honest. It reduces movement speed but gives you a slight increase in view range. That's probably something that's kind of useful if you are running with the Barbarian Archers, but for the Wardogs, nothing special really. Fury obviously is quite nice. It's a nice melee charge, gives quite significant at this low tier increase to impact damage, plus 32%. So that's well worth trying to use with your Wardogs. Although I find it a little bit strange because it activates on both the Wardogs and the melee infantry at the same time. So it's a little bit strange how I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to work. I don't know if it actually activates on the dogs or just the dog handlers. Maybe someone could clarify that for me. And obviously we'll get Rebellion at tier 5. So I've waffled on for long enough, so let's hop into some gameplay and see how we got on. So we have loaded into the Battle of Hadrian's Wall. I was actually playing with Slagbag in this, it's quite a good name, in this battle, so we were moving up together to sort of have a look through this wall, see what we could see through this gap, to support this flank. We had some friendly cavalry moving up in support, and my teammate was playing with the tier 4 pikemen. So as we get up here, there's quite a lot of enemy cavalry around, which is not really too much of a worry. And there's a unit of enemy Wardogs, the equivalent of me as well, which was a bit of a worry for my teammate. Obviously, Wardogs are quite effective against pikes, and they're also quite effective against hoplites as well. So they're well worth using against spearmen. So that was a worry for them. So we've got them to keep an eye on. So we just move up initially, not really doing a lot. We'll stick it in fast forward because it's a bit of a slow start. Just waiting to see what the enemy does. We've obviously got these cavalry sort of skirting around here, so I move away from the gap, and Slagbag comes down and sort of bridges that gap to make sure we're safe. I'm surprised, really, the enemy Wardogs. I don't know if they actually sort of ended up AFK or couldn't seem to make a decision about what to do. I'm surprised they didn't launch their Wardogs against these pikemen at the front. I think it would have been quite effective. But ultimately, their enemy Wardogs get involved in a fight with the Greek cavalry. So I decided it's my time to make a move and I unleash my dogs. So, I think the first thing to talk about is how do the dogs actually work. So, since I'm not recording this live, I can't quite show you exactly, but basically when you click this button here, R is the hotkey to release the dogs, you'll be given a range, a very large range like an archer circle, of how far they can be deployed and an area where the dogs will head towards. So if you select that, and I've obviously placed it over here, the end of this arrow is my dog release direction. So they'll charge over that way, and they will then automatically attack the nearest units they encounter, nearest enemy units they encounter. So you don't actually control the movement of the dogs. Once you've unleashed them, they completely control their own movement. So while in some senses that's not very nice, because if you're trying to tackle some enemy archers, say over here behind the enemy cavalry and wardogs, it will almost be impossible to get your wardogs to attack them, because as soon as you unleash your wardogs, however you send them, they will end up engaging the nearest enemy units, which in this case turned out to be the cavalry. Because they're completely autonomous. You can't actually click them and tell them to go over here, anything like that. You can only actually control the swordsman. But that also means it's a good thing, because trying to control 6 units at once would be a massive micromanagement sort of thing. So as the enemy cavalry sort of pulls out, our wardogs get stuck into the enemy wardogs, which are in the process of attacking the Greek cavalry. So we start to rack up quite a bit of damage, and then they try and retreat. Obviously, but with the wardogs being pretty quick, they can't really get out, and you see them actually start to rack up quite a bit of damage quite quickly. These wardogs are quite powerful. We then get the friendly cavalry stuck in as well, which helps. I make a little bit of an error here. I think I should have pushed up sooner with my sword infantry. I was sort of hesitating, just letting the dogs do the work rather than getting too involved. But I tried well. Since it's just dog handlers we're facing off against, it's not as if we're facing off, against Roman infantry, so I think we might as well get involved. And I activate my charge, which actually is quite effective. It does show that impact damage does quite a bit of damage in that charge. And then these guys obviously try to run, but the dogs, because the dogs are automatically attacking, as they try and run, the dogs keep the pressure on them, because they're just continually attacking the nearest unit until you call them back. And they will keep doing that until you call back. When you press R again, your dog handlers will call your dogs back and they'll return to your unit. So yeah, so I find that works quite well. That was quite an enjoyable start. That gave us a massive amount of damage, killing all those enemy dogs. We basically wiped out all their dogs and damaged half their enemy handlers. But not that much damage to our units and a bit of damage to our dogs. So we then continue to push down the hill. I'm sort of looking for what we've got. We've got no archers on our team, which was kind of a problem we had here about what we're facing off against. The enemy have got quite a lot of units down here in the valley. There's some Romans, lots of enemy hoplites, and then unfortunately the enemy have some units of archers as well, which gives them a real dominance here. So as we continue to push down the valley, Slag pushing down with his pikes, and I push into the forest. Obviously I don't want to face off against Roman infantry really. The swords are quite effective against both the dogs and obviously the handlers. I somehow actually get spotted in this forest, which I was kind of surprised about in a way. Obviously with the dog handlers having pretty limited to no armour, they're just like lightly armoured barbarian infantry. The arrows are really effective against them. They cut them down extremely efficiently, so you've really got to watch out for that. So at this point I'm sort of just sheltering in the forest, trying to look for an opportunity to make a move. And in the end I decide that probably the best thing I can do is to stay in cover for a little bit before launching just my dogs without the handlers against these enemy hoplites. As you can see, the amount of the knockdown we get on the charge is actually quite effective. And you can quite rapidly build up a good amount of damage against these enemy hoplites at 6,000-7,000 already. The enemy dog handlers send in their swordsmen, which are sort of probably a little bit effective against the dogs. And we continue to rack up the damage against the hoplites, because dogs are quite effective against hoplites. But as the damage starts to rack up, I'm starting to become a little bit worried and think that it might be best to try and preserve at least a few of my dogs for later on in the game, so I start to pull them back again. Obviously they're really quick, so they can get out of there nice and quickly and then return to their handlers, my swordsmen in the forest. So it's a bit of a strange battle with how it's laying out. Everyone's sort of all over the place. I think, come back behind these Greek cavalry, because Greek cavalry don't have great hand-to-hand attack at the best of time, so throwing dogs in against them is going to be particularly effective, which of course it is. They're a particularly very good target, so long as they're not being charged. So I come up, I unleash my dogs, but by this point there's not that much left in terms of Greek cavalry, and then unfortunately these units of Romans turn up for me. Obviously I was a little bit conscious that these Romans are going to push into our friendly cavalry, so I kind of wanted to come around in support and take a devastating round of peelers there. And then the Greek cavalry turns up as well, more Greek cavalry. So in this case, this is just a sort of a classic infantry fight. My dogs, or what is left of my handful of dogs, is engaged in another fight. So I know that in hand-to-hand combat, these Romans are far superior to these sort of low-tier barbarian infantry. So I send one unit straight forwards using Boudica's charge, which is actually quite effective, does a bit of damage. I then start to flank my other units around, basically. So I'm using, where I can, Boudica's charge, because it's quite effective. And then we come around, so hopefully I've got a front and a side, and these guys try and get out because they realise they're going to get flanked, but we just managed to clip them with a charge, and we actually get them to rout. Well, unfortunately, reinforcements turn up just at the wrong time, so I don't really get to capitalise on this rout because the speed of these dog handlers would enable me to really do quite a lot of damage to those Hastati if I wanted to. Obviously my charge is on cooldown, and I didn't really fancy trying to get stuck into sort of a much larger unit of Hastati, so I decided it's best to pull back. My dogs are pretty much dead, bar one, I think. Oh no, two dogs. You see, I mean, now those enemies have moved off, they just go and attack the nearest unit, which is obviously in here. Dogs themselves don't have any line of sight, as you saw there. When my handlers lose sight, you don't get vision from the dogs. So you need to use your handlers to provide vision, not your dogs. So I just move into sort of a bit of a fight going on with these Hastati. I managed to sort of rout them, because even though these sword units are quite small units, so in a fight they're pretty poor, obviously they are all independently controlled like any other 3 units, so that enables you to get the flanks just as easily as anyone else, and we can rout those two quite efficiently. So where things were getting a bit harder though, I try and sort of pull the same trick as I did earlier. I try and slam one unit into the front of the Hastati while flanking with the others, that was my theory, but then we get the Greek cavalry coming around the corner against us, and we've got the other Hastati coming in. I could have frontally charged these guys, but I thought it was better just to try and, since I thought this battle was lost, particularly with the Greeks, just do as much damage as we could against this enemy unit that started before we died. That was sort of my thinking. Fortunately, these units end up routing because they get rear flanked by the Greeks. So things are really starting to fall apart. But we have had quite a successful game. We've got a large amount of damage. Unfortunately, the battle's starting to turn against us a little bit. Those Greeks pull through us in their retreat. We'll get a little bit of damage on them. But not enough, and our units are just being decimated now by the Romans. They're just so vastly outnumbered us, there's not really a lot we can do there, unfortunately, as we just sort of continue to get cut down. Oh dear. And that unfortunately ends my battle with the Wardogs. But hopefully that kind of gives you a bit of an idea how they play out. You just really got to think about the fact that the Wardogs will automatically attack the nearest unit. So if you want to target something behind an enemy unit, then it's not going to be possible because your dogs will automatically attack the nearest unit. So if I deploy them now, they'd attack this guy over here. So that's just what you kind of got to think about when using them. Other things to note about the Wardogs are they aren't affected by friendly or enemy hoplites. So if you charge them into an enemy formation while you've got friendly pikes, it doesn't matter, that's absolutely fine because they go underneath the level of the pikes. So that actually works really well. That means one of the few units that can actually sort of work in support with the friendly hoplites. And the true is the same with the enemy units. If an enemy, 2 enemy pike units, are facing you, something like that, you will charge under the enemy pike, so they'll have to come out of phalanx if they want to hurt you. And that's also how you'd have to counter the pike units. I try and avoid fights with Roman infantry or sort of any of the infantry with them if you can, because they're not so good at that, unfortunately. So yes, so the battle starts to really tip against us. Poor old Slagbag's having a go at trying to get his pikemen back, but then ends up not being able to get his pikes down because he ends up getting engaged in combat. So things don't really pan out very well for him there. And then he gets his pike down, but he's facing the wrong way. Oh no! And then he gets rear-flanked by the cavalry. It's not quite his game. Obviously, it was quite unfortunate our team didn't have any archers. That's the word. Any ranged units on our team, which made it kind of hard to play against when the enemy had some good units of archers available to them. Oh dear, and they're decimated by the enemy cavalry. I think this battle ultimately goes to the bitter end, so we'll just play it through, sort of mostly the end of the review of the Wardogs. I'm quite looking forward to when Boudica gets on to tier 5. I think that's going to be interesting with Rebellion. It's going to give quite a bit of extra strength to the Wardogs. And obviously, while it allows you to keep your sort of sword units, your main controllable units still alive, so that's kind of cool. It's like having extra units because they're kind of expendable. So that's kind of a nice little feature, I think. Obviously, Boudica's charge is quite nice. But as I say, I don't know if that affects the Wardogs or just the Wardog handlers. So someone could let me know that if they know. That was kind of interesting. What's going on at the end here? No one's quite sure what they want to do. It's actually still a pretty close battle, although unfortunately it ends in defeat for us. These guys just sort of hanging back at base, just trying to play defensive, I think. There's 2 units of full hoplites here just hiding in the forest, which is kind of a strange move, really. I don't know why they didn't push up while all the combat was going on in the enemy base. They could have made a real difference if they'd been there to support at the time when the fighting was going on. So that's going on. Looks like the enemy is starting to push into our base. The poor barbarians aren't having a very good time of it. It's just quite a strange play by this guy. Seems to have studiously avoided battle this entire game. Obviously now he's coming into range of the archers, and the light artillery looks like it's going to set itself up. Although then he's going to overrun them, or try to, which he failed to do. He's going to rout. Oh dear. It's kind of a bit of a lesson of why while it's good to defend base, it's not so good just to sort of effectively camp in base for the entire match. It's better to push out, support your allies, while keeping an eye on the minimap to come back if the base is threatened. Just sitting in the base the whole time doesn't really work, because you end up with the rest of your army getting defeated, and then you're being stuck there on your own. Obviously he's cleverly tried to outflank the enemy here by pushing into the enemy base with his units, but obviously I'm pretty sure the enemy obviously has cavalry to come back and sort of prevent that. I suspect they have infantry as well. Oh, it doesn't matter because the time is up. They ran out of time. He might have actually won on the Kapat if they'd had a longer time. We ended up as top player, although we didn't do as well as the enemy Wardog player in the team, unfortunately. But all in all, it was quite a good game, and hopefully it gave you a brief overview of the Wardogs. Yeah, they are a little bit strange to play at first, I will say that. Certainly give yourself a couple of games to get used to them, because it can be a bit confusing at first. But any questions, let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel for more Total War Arena content, and I shall see you all on the next episode.